I still don't understand why the FBI director did it when he did. I think he was trying to protect himself and the institution. But the fact that he did look at all of these and we are now telling people that they found nothing new is very significant and very important. One of the things that I'm the most concerned about is that the day after this election, we've got to come together. We are a country that's been divided. I don't like it. I don't like what's happened. And I hope my Republican friends, my Democratic friends, we're all going to come together the day after this election, no matter what happens, and remember that we're Americans first.
Congresswoman, I wonder if you can weigh in on what the political implications might be of what I just read. In the wake of that revelation a number of days ago that Director Comey was looking into newly discovered emails, we saw these polls get tighter in almost every battleground state and nationwide. And a lot of Democrats who I've been talking to starting to get very jittery that those revelations could cost Secretary Clinton the presidency. Now we are learning at this hour that the FBI director is essentially saying that what they found in these emails doesn't change his bottom line equation. He's not taking any further action. Do you think that we could see Secretary Clinton's poll numbers go up?
I think, the next 48 hours, anything can happen. Please do not let complacency set in any place. I'm sure that this will make some people feel calmer, and quite frankly, it'll get others outraged. So I'm glad to hear him come out and say this, because there's been a lot of conspiracy theories, again, a lot of people out there saying, I think that it again clears her of any wrongdoing. That is what is important in what we're hearing. She had no wrongdoing. But we've got 48 hours ahead of us where no one can be complacent. We all need to go out to vote. We've all got to make sure that we understand our future's at stake on Election Day.
And we have a little bit more to add to this breaking story. Brian Fallon, communications director for the Clinton campaign, has just put out a tweet. We want to put it up on our air. I'm going to read it. Brian Fallon tweeting, "We were always confident nothing would cause the July decision to be revisited. Now Director Comey has confirmed it." Were you always confident, Congresswoman? Did you know ultimately this would be the outcome? Did you think they could resolve it this quickly?
I prayed that they would resolve it this quickly, and I think the FBI had a moral responsibility to do it because of all the false things that started coming out. So I'm glad to see that it happened. I actually took Secretary Clinton at her word. She said that she made a mistake. She said that she hadn't done anything wrong. I've known this woman for 30 years. I've worked with her on so many projects. I know what a good, decent, honorable person she is. So I'm glad that it happened, but it is not giving me one sense of comfort for 48 hours. We've got to be all hands on deck working hard.
Congresswoman Dingell, I want to ask you to stand by as I bring in Ben Ginsberg, who is one of our Republican analysts. Really appreciate your being here to help us break down this breaking news. Let me just remind our viewers, at this very moment, we are getting a letter from Director Comey, which he sent to Congress, and he essentially says they have gone through those newly discovered emails. And he says, based on our review, we have not changed our conclusions that we expressed in July with respect to Secretary Clinton. Ben, what is the political significance of this? As I was just discussing with Congresswoman Dingell, we saw the polls essentially start to tighten in a number of battleground states in the wake of Comey's first announcement. Could this be a game changer?
Well, there's not too much time left in the game, so it will certainly change the discussion and the narrative in the last 48 hours of voting. I suspect that most voters are actually locked in now, and so a sort of non-prosecution statement from the FBI director may or may not actually be a motivator to get people out to vote. But make no mistake about it, it will change what both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and the campaign say in the last 48 hours. What more discussion in the last 48 hours about the emails will do is basically take the Clinton campaign off its positive message, and the Trump campaign is going to have to change its motivational message. So this does kind of scramble what the campaigns will be saying.
And Ben, as you and I are having this discussion, we are watching President Obama depart Marine One. He is getting ready for his big event in Florida. He's about to depart. He hasn't gotten off yet. And of course, this will be welcome news to President Obama and to all of Secretary Clinton's top surrogates. There is President Obama wearing his sunglasses. about to address the folks there in that critical battleground state. Ben, I've been talking to my colleague Chris Jansing, who says Florida is going to be another nail-biter. Could this type of revelation that we're hearing from Director Comey, and again, just to remind our viewers, he says, based on our review, we have not changed our conclusions that we expressed in July with respect to Secretary Clinton having reviewed all of these emails. Could this make a difference in a state like Florida?
It can make a difference in any state, I suspect. I get flashbacks when you start talking about Florida. But what's interesting is both parties have been driving their voters to the polls in the last week while the investigation was still pending. The Clinton campaign was very much talking about how many new people it had driven to the polls while this cloud was sort of over them. So what you don't know is all the votes that managed to get banked in the last week, how they'll vote, how motivated they were to vote for Secretary Clinton, how motivated they were to vote down ballot for Republican Senate candidates. So this will be used as a motivational speech to those voters who are still left to go out and vote on Election Day.
And Ben, I'm going to ask you to stand by as I bring in my colleague, Andrea Mitchell. Andrea, you and I have been tracking the fast-moving developments with respect to Director Comey announcing that he is looking into newly discovered emails, which may or may not have related to Secretary Clinton's State Department. What is your reaction to the revelation that at this hour, Director Comey sending a letter to Congress essentially saying they've reviewed all of the newly discovered emails and nothing has changed?
Well, just share with you Brian Fallon, the spokesman for the Clinton campaign's tweet, saying we were always confident nothing would cause the July decision to be revisited. Now Director Comey has confirmed it. I mean, this is a clean bill of health. And no matter what the days that they've lost in trying to continue with their original plan for a 5 or 6 or 7 day uplifting closing message, now they can, as they had hoped, resume the closing message, the ads that they've done, the final campaign sprint. A lot of damage has been caused. There's no question that they've lost their lead here in New Hampshire in the last week since the first FBI letter came out from Comey. They have lost advantage if they ever had one in Ohio. They're scrambling to defend Michigan. They're neck and neck in Florida. But now they can try to reach out to those independent swing voters, particularly here in New Hampshire, in Michigan, and other states, and try to close this down because the Trump campaign, with a very unusually disciplined appeal, has been going after her hammer and tongs for the past 9 days since the first Comey letter came out. And this, I don't know if this is going to review and cause another swing from Trump and his allies going back at Comey after declaring him a hero for the last 9 days. But now at least the Clinton campaign can try to close this down. It's still hanging over their head, and the doubts have been raised by Trump and all the others. We see in our own polling what those word clouds show. The distrust for Hillary Clinton, profound for someone who is this close to potentially becoming president of the United States.
Andrea, as I discussed this with Ben Ginsberg, I asked if this was a game changer. He raised the very accurate point that there's not that much time left in the game. You have covered a number of presidential campaigns. What is the real-time impact of something like this breaking just 48 hours before Election Day? I guess the question is, in some of these states, could it make all the difference? Or do you think that the cake is baked?
The cake may well be baked because that 11 days out, that letter from Jim Comey had a really big influence. First of all, most of the polling places, early polling places in North Carolina, had only just opened on Thursday, and his letter came out on Friday. So you've had a whole week of damage done to the Clinton campaign in a number of states that have early voting. Whether or not this news can catch up to those states that are still doing Tuesday voting, and to those who have not yet voted, who are planning to vote on Monday, remains to be seen. But this is awfully late in the game for the news, for the good news to catch up with the bad news that preceded it 11 days out.
And we are looking at Donald Trump's plane in Minnesota. He is about to disembark, and we are going to keep that live picture up. And as we do, I want to bring Ben Ginsberg back in. Ben, talk about, if you would, there's been a lot of discussion about Director Comey and the role that he has now played in this election cycle, and the fact that he now has this sort of thorny relationship with Donald Trump and Secretary Clinton. He was even quoted as saying it might be awkward when there is a new president, no matter who wins. How does this impact his role with the potential next president, whether it's Trump or Clinton?
Well, by him doing what he did, both opening the investigation because he thought it was important to do that and to tell people about it, and him having resolved it within 48 hours of the election, but before the election, he has certainly brought the FBI front and center into this campaign in a way that it never has been before, and I suspect they are not particularly happy about being put in the role that Director Comey thought it should be. Let me also make the point that we can rest assured that behind the doors of the Trump campaign right now, there is some very frenzied activity figuring out what Donald Trump should say when he comes out. And we should also not underestimate the importance of what he says and what his tone is and how he deals with this hard-breaking news that does cut against the narrative that he's been using for the past few days. So this is going to be a big moment to the extent the cake is not baked in the next 48 hours.
You raise such an important point because Donald Trump has been so on message, Ben. We have seen a very different Donald Trump, and that's part of why he's closing out this race on such a strong note. What do you anticipate his response is going to be when he takes the podium?
Well, I wish I had the abilities to speculate on that. I mean, he basically has two choices, which is one, to go hammer and tong against the FBI for reaching this conclusion when he'll say the evidence was so obvious that this conclusion is wrong. The second is to try and take a more statesman-like approach to say they did everything they could. What all this has pointed out is the weaknesses with Hillary Clinton, that even if she got a clean bill of health on this, she's still not trustworthy and honest. In other words, reinforcing what people say in the polls, but him trying to take a more statesman-like and not bombastic approach here in the last 48 hours. And that, in a sense, can be an advantage for him.
President Obama taking the podium in Kissimmee, Florida. We will watch and monitor to see if he raises this issue at all. Congresswoman Dingell, I want to go back to you. Ben talks about the fact that there are likely discussions going on right now within the Trump campaign about how exactly he should respond. How do you anticipate Secretary Clinton will respond when we hear from her later today?
Well, I agree with everything that's been said so far, by the way. I think that she will be relieved, but have known all along that she had been telling the truth, and glad to have her name cleared again and again. Why this has to keep happening, I don't know. I think Ben is absolutely correct. It's going to be very interesting to see how Trump responds, and if he is presidential or is what some of us predict that he may be, which is emotional and bombastic and not presidential or statesman-like. So I think these next few hours are as important for Donald Trump as they are for anybody.
And we're just hearing from Jennifer Palmieri, who is, of course, the Clinton campaign communications director. She's holding a gaggle on the campaign plane. And let me just read a little bit of what she is telling reporters at this hour. She has said, glad to see Director Comey affirmed the conclusion that he reached in July and that the matter is resolved. That might be a preview of what we hear from Secretary Clinton when, in fact, we do hear from her today. The campaign clearly breathing a sigh of relief about this. And Congresswoman, I think a lot of people are surprised that it was resolved so quickly, because there was a sense, at least we had said, this is going to take quite some time. It might not be resolved by the time Election Day comes around. Talk about the significance and the pressure that the FBI was under to get to this conclusion before Election Day.
FBI was under enormous pressure. Quite frankly, there are just many, many people who feel it was just irresponsible for the timing, and they didn't understand it. Quite frankly, I heard from from many people within the FBI bureau that couldn't understand why they had been political when they had never been political before. I think he had a moral responsibility to do what he did today, because the fact of the matter is he cast dispersion on a character which we're now learning was unfair. So I'm glad it has been. We've seen the truth again. We're moving on, and we need to focus on the next 48 hours about the future of this country.